The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the shocking shooting of a Kentucky judge in his chambers. It was all caught on camera, and the man holding the gun, the local sheriff. Here's the story. Whitesburg, Kentucky is a small rural community of under 2,000 residents in eastern Kentucky. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, a place where many folks have both personal and professional connections. And that was the situation with the local sheriff, Sean Mickey Steins, and the only judge in town, Kevin Mullins. Both of them with great reputations, known especially for their work in trying to help their community battle the opioid epidemic, which was taking so many lives and destroying so many families. On September 19th, the judge and the sheriff grabbed lunch together with some other people. Later that afternoon, the sheriff headed over to the judge's chambers. Once he got there, he went into the judge's office for a closed-door private meeting. What happened next, no one in this small town expected. The sheriff fired his gun several times, taking the life of Judge Mullins in his own chambers. But this was not the first crime to occur in the judge's chambers. It was also the site of a sextortion scandal where the sheriff's bailiff was prosecuted for extorting sex from female detainees in exchange for not having to pay for ankle monitoring services. These criminal actions took place in the judge's chambers and bathroom after hours. So now, with Sheriff Mickey Steins charged with the first-degree murder of the judge after this sextortion scandal, everyone is wondering what is going on in this small Kentucky town. So the other part of all of this, part of the backdrop is that sextortion scandal was now manifesting itself in a federal civil lawsuit. And as part of that, the sheriff himself was being deposed and was one of the defendants in the case. Well, obviously, the bailiff was under his supervision. He's in charge. He's the sheriff, for goodness sake. So all of this kind of plays in the backdrop of what's going on, right? Small town. How could these two things happen in the same place? I want you to take a listen to the sheriff's defense attorney, Jeremy Bartley, here, talking about and asking if there is any connection here.
Do you know whether this is connected to the federal lawsuit he was a part of? Is there any connection between these?
I think that the timing of what occurred is certainly something that is going to be a crucial point in this case. The timing of the deposition, amongst other things and other background information that will complete that story, but I do, yes, to answer your question, I do believe that that is a piece. This is a large story that's a story that in some ways is difficult to tell. We look forward to sharing a more complete version of that as we go through this judicial process.
And he's so right on. There is a piece that is just missing. There's a piece missing. But you heard what he said, that he believes it's all connected, as far including other pieces. So this scandal where female detainees are being extorted for sex is somehow connected to the shooting of the judge? Well, that all brings us to my first question in this investigation. Was the judge involved somehow in this whole scandal that was taking place before he was shot? The other crime and criminal conduct that was taking place in his chambers, where these women are being extorted for sex. Joining me to help answer all of this, the attorney representing the woman suing the sheriff, Ned Pillersdorf, is with us, and psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. Thank you both. Before we get to any of this, I want to play something, and this is an audio recording about this whole scandal. I'm talking about the extortion of sex scandal that is taking place. A female speaker, a male speaker. Let's listen first.
But he does have some videotapes of some stuff in the judge's chambers.
What kind of stuff?
Just with girls, sexual and stuff.
What describe? Have you seen the videos?
I've seen one partly, and just him having sex with girls for the able to get out of jail.
Who was having sex?
Ben and just some higher ups up there.
Who?
The judge and.
You saw the video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you see on the video? I mean,
I've seen Judge Mullins having sex with a girl.
Who was the girl?
I don't know, because I don't know a lot of people from over there.
Where was it at?
In his office, in the judge's chambers.
Is that the same place that you were meeting Ben? Is that how you know it was the judge's chambers?
Yeah.
And this was Judge who?
Mullins.
Okay, everyone's jaws just dropped. Ned, let me begin with you. What is the context of this recording that we just listened to?
The context was we had initially filed the civil rights lawsuit on behalf of Sabrina. The Ben she is talking about is Ben Fields, who would eventually plead guilty to what you call sextortion. He was the bailiff who was extorting Sabrina and other women for sexual favors, taking advantage of their ankle bracelet situation. This audio you played, I was actually there. What happened was after we filed the lawsuit and before Fields was charged with the crime, the Attorney General's office made an appointment to come to my hometown of Prestonsburg and interviewed Sabrina. And what it is, Vinnie, is called a proffer. And it's important to understand what a proffer is. A proffer is when the prosecution wants to find out every information they can find out. They ask all sorts of open-ended questions. Proffers are different from what's in a courtroom where you're only allowed to talk about what you think is admissible evidence. A typical proffer is tell us every rumor you've heard, tell us every double, triple, quadruple hearsay, tell us your speculation. So it's important for those talking about this release of this audio. First of all, we did not release it. As I understand from our friends in the media, the criminal case against Ben Fields is over because of the prosecution believing Sabrina. They indicted Mr. Fields, and he eventually pled guilty to basically every charge brought against him. So that's a done deal. So I think what happened is the reason this tape got released, we have an open records law in Kentucky, which is a good law. And media organizations contacted the original investigator whose voice you heard in the tape. And that was part of a proffer that I sat in. After the proffer, the Attorney General's office, and I've had my differences with them over the past, but I give them high marks. They went forward and indicted a popular local figure, the bailiff, Ben Fields, who's referred to. They prosecuted him. They secured guilty pleas, guilty verdicts, and time in jail. So that's the context of how this video got out there. But I want to be clear, we're not publicizing the video, I should say the audio. And I just want to be clear for your viewers that was released by the Attorney General's office, and I'm not critical of them either. They have to deal with the open records law, which has consequences when you don't comply. So that was the context of how my client gave the statement. Is it related, unrelated to the civil case? I don't want to speculate. And is it related or unrelated to to the eventual shooting. That's a speculation. My civil case is pending. And in fairness to the defendants, they deny the allegations. I think the only thing undeniable at this point is Fields did plead guilty to the criminal case. Just putting that all in context.
Dr. Janie Lacey, this is difficult stuff when you are extorted for sex and you become a victim. And we know she was a victim. Her perpetrator was prosecuted, as Ned has pointed out. And now she's providing information. What are the issues that someone who's been through that kind of trauma, and again, the big concern here is getting to the truth. I'm not saying she's not telling the truth. I'm not saying she is telling the truth. She's making a proffer. I would presume she wouldn't want to lie about anything. Give us some perspective from the viewpoint of the victim, providing this is explosive type of information. Talking about a judge, a sitting judge doing this, and she said she witnessed it on a video.
Well, you said it, Vinnie. It's an explosive situation, and the victim in this case, especially when we're dealing with power positions, that people that hold significant authority over a victim, especially in these situations, right? So we're looking at a lot of fear. There's a lot of risk that's involved because of potential consequences that the person can fear depending on these power positions and what she knows, and being able to come forward to be able to save and to help probably the other potential victims that would be involved. We know the weight that victim would be carrying, and that great amount of telling the truth and telling her truth, because there's going to be a lot of implications, especially for someone who's in the system, right? They know the risk that's involved when you're coming up against these power positions, especially in the small town where, the fine line between someone's professional life and their personal life can get blurred very quickly. And we do know the mindset of someone that has a lack of integrity and a lack of ethics in their personal life can bleed over into their professional life. And then you get the groupthink if there's multiple people that are aware of these situations, and the silence and enabling behavior. So it creates this whole system that a victim would have to come up and speak against. So the great fear and the potential consequences that could be weighing heavily on her is real.
Dr. Janie Lacey, thank you so much for your analysis. Ned's going to stay with us. Coming up next, is the shooting connected to this sextortion scandal?
They say that the Sheriff Vicky Steins is involved. I don't know.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
We believe we're standing right where this case should be, a few feet from where this case should be tried, right here amongst Mickey Stein's peers.
That's the attorney for Sheriff Mickey Steins, is now the former Sheriff Mickey Steins, talking about where he wants the murder trial to be, right where the shooting took place. And we know it took place there because we saw it all on video, right? So before this murder case, the sheriff had another legal case he was dealing with. As a matter of fact, he'd been deposed earlier that same week. It was a case involving sextortion, where female detainees who didn't want to pay for their ankle monitor or couldn't pay for their ankle monitors were extorted into having sex with the bailiff, and in exchange for not having to pay for the ankle monitors, so they could be free and not locked up in jail. So an audio recording of one of these victims of this scandal was interviewed by the Attorney General's office. We've gotten those recordings. This is one of the victims talking about seeing videos of more conduct like this. Take a listen.
But you saw the video of the judge.
Yes.
Any other videos that you actually saw?
No. They say that the Sheriff Vicky Steins is involved. I don't know.
Who said that?
Chad, he said he had videos with Mickey. Mickey used to do the same thing when he was over house arrest.
Mickey is the sheriff. Now, the sheriff apparently used to be the bailiff before he became sheriff. At one point, he's the bailiff for that same judge. What's going on here? What is it? These are, I guess, what she heard. She didn't witness this. But how does this all play with one another? Brings me to my next question in our investigation, which is the shooting connected to this sextortion scandal? Are these two things that all seemingly took place in the same place, are they connected? Still with us, Ned Pillersdorf, who's representing that victim in the civil suit, and joining me, Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's been on this story from the beginning and spent time in Kentucky investigating for us. Let me play this from Detective Clayton Stamper from Kentucky State Police, talking about the actual, what's taking place in the chambers before the shooting.
And can you describe for us what happened immediately prior to the clip that we saw?
Sheriff Steins uses his telephone to make some phone calls. He then borrows Judge Mullins' cell phone and appears to make a call on that. And that led to what you just saw.
There is a point when Sheriff Steins asked for to see the telephone of Judge Mullins.
Yes.
Are you aware of any recent content that was up and could have been relevant at the time of their discussion?
I was told that Sheriff Steins had tried to call his daughter, and he had tried to call his daughter from the judge's phone also.
Have officers confirmed that the sheriff's daughter's phone number was on Judge Mullins' phone?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
So that number had been called from Judge Mullins' phone?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of pieces here, and I want to begin with you, Cody. All these different pieces, you know, everyone's trying to get to the understanding why, but trying to figure out if the sextortion is connected to the shooting, we have to look at the other things that we know. These calls are one of the things that we know about. We also know about some statements he made. Let's talk about those. What are those different pieces that we actually know?
So you hit the nail right on the head there, Vinny. Of course, we just heard he tried to call his daughter from Judge Mullins' phone, and it actually came out, we were under the impression after that hearing that the number of his daughter was saved in Judge Mullins' phone, but according to the local paper, the Mountain Eagle, the number was just dialed on Judge Mullins' phone. But when he got arrested, Sheriff Steins, his first statement to police was, "They're trying to take my wife and kid," which is a direct correlation. Tried to call his daughter right directly before the shooting happened in those chambers, and then he sat around at the courthouse outside of his chambers, waited to turn himself in, and then the first thing out of his mouth is that they're trying to take my wife and kid. So the burning question here is why. They were just at lunch beforehand. They'd worked together for over a decade. What could have led to this, and why was it so important to call his daughter in that moment?
Ned, we're trying to put the pieces together. You've got this civil suit, which is connected to the sextortion to a certain extent, right? But not necessarily connected to the shooting. But his lawyer is saying there is some connection here. From your perspective, what are you gathering as you try to put these pieces together between this scandal? How deep do you suspect the scandal goes? Does it go beyond this deputy, and could it have something to do with the actual shooting?
You know, the best way to answer the question is the clip you filed of the defense lawyer. Former Sheriff Steins is well represented, very good lawyer, and the first question you would ask your client, why did you do this? He knows what Sheriff Steins told him. The video clip you showed seems to indicate that, yes, it is tied to my civil case. I don't know the answer to that. I do think the really interesting point is, Vinny, Sheriff Steins does not want to change a venue. You know, think about that logically. If a random person who, for whatever reason, shot the judge, you know, usually when it happens, it's usually a domestic violence, somebody's irate. The last place, that random person who would want to be tried would be in a small county where everybody knew a popular local judge. That person would want to change a venue. It's astonishing in this case, not only did Mr. Bartley, who is a well-regarded lawyer, he said two things. One, he said it was related to my civil case. Two, he said, I don't want to change a venue, which tells me there's some sort of almost jury nullification defense brewing out there. I'm hesitant to speculate on that.
Sure, and Ned, I just want people to know you're in the midst of a civil case, and you have certain obligations and restrictions on what you can say. So I think we all understand that. But go ahead, complete your thought.
You know, my thought, really, as a criminal defense lawyer, I've only been a criminal defense lawyer in Appalachia for 43 years. I think there is some sort of jury nullification defense. Self-defense is not in the cards, obviously. Him tying it to the civil case I filed, and the civil case I filed, it's a civil case. This is our side, not the other side denies it. Makes some sweeping allegations that there was this toxic mixture of sex and extortion in the courthouse. My client was forced to have oral sex and sexual intercourse in the judge's chambers. And we sued Judge Steins on the theory that he knew or should have known this was going on. And it wasn't just one lady. We know of at least three.
At least three. Let's do this, Ned. Let's continue our conversation in just a moment. Coming up, why is there a camera in the judge's chambers? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the shooting of Kentucky Judge Kevin Mullins by Sheriff Mickey Steins. It's a story that raises a lot of questions, but the biggest one is why? Here's the story.
Appalachia is the part of eastern Kentucky where the towns are small and folks look out for each other. There's a lot of respect for law enforcement and the justice system. And folks who work in that system get to know each other pretty well. Such is the case for the local sheriff Mickey Steins and his friend, District Judge Kevin Mullins. But like any place, sometimes there is controversy. In Letcher County, it was a deputy who got caught sexually assaulting female detainees in the judge's chambers. That was a couple of years ago, but now everyone's taking another look at that case because something else happened in the judge's chambers. The judge was shot and killed, and the local sheriff is the one being charged. Sheriff Mickey Steins is now charged with first-degree murder of a public official for an act that was all caught on camera.
Caught on camera. Amazingly, this was caught on camera. So I'm going to give you the warning I always give you every time we show the video. We're going to go through the video. We'll freeze it at the moments that the weapon is fired, and we'll blur the judge after he gets shot, so you don't have to worry about that. But still, it is incredibly shocking to watch this take place. What you're looking at is the shooting and killing of a judge in his own chambers. So let's begin. There's no audio, but you can see the judge putting up his hand. He's smoking a cigarette. Whoa, wait. And then the first shot is fired. But the sheriff now goes around as the judge is trying to get some sense of cover. He's still alive, approaches him and fires the gun again. And now the sheriff is about to leave, but you see the desk is moving. That's because the judge is still alive, and the sheriff notices it and fires the weapon again, and then leaves. And as you watch this, you can see that they're having a conversation, and the judge has to be completely shocked that this is taking place, that he is pointing the gun at me and now is going to fire it. But we pointed out, the whole thing's on video. Now, it's not audio, but there's video. Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Why is there a camera in the judge's chambers? It's almost as if like this is a reality show or something where, all right, let's set it up. Here's a good place. This is where you sit. This is where like everything is caught on camera, but it's the judge's chambers. Joining me to help answer this question, the attorney representing the woman suing the sheriff, Ned Pillersdorf, is with us. And he presided over the Anna Nicole Smith body custody case. Retired Judge Larry Seidlin is back with us as well. Judge, I want to begin with you for some context here. Okay, I've been in some chambers. My father was a federal judge. There was no camera in there. How unusual or shocking is it to you as a judge that there's a camera in the judge's chambers?
Well, it's pretty, Vinny, it's pretty perverse for him to have a camera in his chambers. There's an inkling here, an inclination that maybe he was having sex in his chambers and wanted to film it. I mean, I had a TV set in my chambers. I had a little crib for my daughter because she was born towards the end of my judicial career. When I was about 50, she came in. We made like a playpen in the chambers, but no cameras, because a camera, you want to safeguard your position in the chambers, the judge does. You want to sort of isolate yourself. It's the one place where you can blow off steam. So you don't want to be on camera. You want to be off camera. Now, during the big case you were watching over me, the Anna Nicole case, I would bring the parties into my chambers and try to mediate, try to wrestle them a little bit to try to settle the case. So I never wanted a camera in my courtroom, in my chambers, and I never wanted a court reporter there either. It would violate the confidentiality of what I wanted to achieve.
I understand 1,000%. Like, this is where if you're gonna try to settle a case, you bring people in. Things happen in chambers. It doesn't have to be like things like happened in this judge's chambers, but just the normal course of business. Why would you put a camera there? I want to take a listen to this audio recording. We got this from the Attorney General's office. This is actually Ned's client speaking with investigators. Take a listen.
You made reference to the judge's chambers. Describe where these events happen. Is this an office area? Is this a...
You walk in, it's your first left, and there's a big desk. You walk in like this, and there's like a big desk right there. There's a bathroom right here. And, windows you can see outside.
Okay. What made you think it was the judge's chambers?
He said it was.
And what judge's chambers do you believe that to be?
He told me it's Judge Mullins.
Judge Mullins?
And I said, is there cameras in here? And he said, no, and I still didn't believe it. I was like, why is there not? To me, there were big cameras in the judge's chambers.
Okay, let me ask you, Ned, do we know the history behind the camera in the judge's chambers? Like, when it was there? Because it seems in that proffer that your client was making, she was asking, are there cameras there? And was told no, but didn't necessarily believe that. What are your thoughts? What have you found out about the history of the camera in the judge's chambers?
In my experience being in dozens of Appalachian courthouses, there are cameras usually in a conference room near the judge's chambers. My experience is I never heard of a camera being in a judge's private chambers before. What I read in the Mountain Eagle, which is an excellent local newspaper, they included in an article that they understood that the cameras were installed after my lawsuit was filed. In my lawsuit, I think you've mentioned this, the allegation that Ms. Atkins was extorted for sex in the judge's chambers, as she said. But to answer your question, is it unusual for cameras to be in the judge's chambers? In my opinion, yes. In fact, when I heard about the shooting, I was surprised to hear that this video even existed. And I have no idea why cameras were put into the chambers. I'm fairly confident they were put in there after the incident with my client. And when and why they were subsequently added, it may be related to my case or maybe not, but it is. I've never heard of a judge having cameras in his chambers. This is the first I've heard of that.
Judge Larry, before we run out of time, go ahead.
Vinnie, I served as administrative judge to 5 chief judges. So I was always walking into other judges' chambers to make sure everything was good. And none of these judges had cameras. None of them did. And then I was vice president of the judges for the state of Florida. And I would visit judges all over the state. No one had a camera in their courtroom. It's perverse for this judge to have a camera in his courtroom. It leads me to believe some of the theories that are being spoken about in this case, that this judge was off the chain, was off the charts. And I think the evidence will be showing that during the trial. I hate to predict that because it's pretty gruesome, but I think we're going to see some crazy stuff coming out of this trial.
I agree with you, Judge. Judge Larry Seidlin, great to see you. Thank you so much. Ned's going to stay with us. Still to come, what was the relationship between the sheriff and the judge?
It was regarding the dinner at Streetside and things that led up to the shooting.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
It was regarding the dinner at Streetside and things that led up to the shooting.
So what was going on the day that Sheriff Mickey Steins shot the judge? Well, there was a lot going on that day. As a matter of fact, that wasn't the first time they had been in contact. Take a listen to Detective Clayton Stamper here talking about what the sheriff and the judge were doing earlier the same day.
Prior in the day, there had been a lunch meeting between Sheriff Steins and Judge Mullins.
There was.
Pardon?
There was.
Okay. Sorry, I see one. I couldn't hear your response. I wasn't being trite. So where did this take place?
It's a restaurant called Streetside, and it's just down the street from the courthouse.
Okay. And it's my understanding there were a couple of other people who attended the luncheon?
There were several, yes.
Okay. And at some point after that, they wrapped up lunch and left, obviously, and went back to the courthouse. Are you aware of anything so far in your investigation that would tell us there was any issues at lunch between Judge Mullins and Sheriff Steins?
No.
Okay. But someone on behalf of the KSP has spoken to those witnesses?
Yes, they've all been interviewed.
And there was nothing unusual that had arisen during that luncheon?
I was told that the judge made a statement to Mickey about, do we need to meet private in my chambers? That's all I was told.
Do you know the context of what the conversation was before that they would need to discuss in chambers?
I do not.
It's my understanding there were some people who were having a meeting with Judge Mullins prior to the sheriff's entry into the chambers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Have you identified those witnesses?
I don't know the names of them. There's about approximately 4 people in there. Then Sheriff Steins enters the judge's chambers, and everybody else clears out.
They went to lunch. They went to lunch together. I mean, you've got the judge in town, you've got the sheriff in town. Obviously, they work in the same building. There's going to be a lot of interaction, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about these two. What was the relationship between the sheriff and the judge? What was going on here? Ned Pillersdorf is still with us and joining me, Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who spent some time investigating this story out in Kentucky. Cody, let me start with you. Any indication anywhere, whether from testimony or anything people were saying in town, about bad blood between these two? Or was it, my perception from where I'm sitting here is that, like, these guys knew each other and were somewhat friendly.
That's exactly right, Vinny. These two worked under each other, or Sheriff Steins worked under Judge Mullins for over 10 years, presumed friends, going to lunch together, hanging out. Their families knew each other. No indication from Clayton Stamper, no indication from those people in the town that there was any sort of bad blood at all. But as you heard, they were at that lunch at Streetside Bar and Grill, which was only about 100, 150 yards away from where the chambers were, and they were there with a bunch of other people. And for Sheriff Mickey Steins to bring that up, to bring up whatever it was, we don't have the context of exactly what it was, but we know ultimately what happened once they left Streetside and went back to the chambers. So whatever was pressing him, whatever he felt that passionate about, for him to bring it up at that luncheon around other people, he must have felt very strongly about it, to take it back and then just a few minutes later ultimately end up shooting this judge, no matter what the context of that may have been.
Yeah, it seems something came up at lunch. I want to play this. This is a testimony from Detective Clayton Stamper, Kentucky State Police, talking about another phone connected to this investigation.
There was one other phone that's currently being examined, and the basic reason it was seized was there was a text conversation between Sheriff Steins and some of his employees with the sheriff's office.
Okay, and that was an additional phone of Sheriff Steins?
It was a phone of, I guess she's the, I don't know what her title is, but she's employed. She's not sworn. She's employed by the Letcher County Sheriff's Office. And she voluntarily gave her phone to the person that interviewed her.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, could you explain why that was relevant or germane to your investigation?
I didn't conduct that interview, but it was, I guess it was regarding the dinner at Streetside and things that led up to the shooting. But I don't have those results either, so I don't know exactly what was said.
And when he says dinner at Streetside, he's actually referring to the lunch at Streetside prior to the shooting. So, Ned Pillersdorf, it just seems that there's a conversation at that lunch that is the genesis of some sort of tension between the judge and the sheriff. But these two have a history, as Cody pointed out. I mean, for years, the sheriff was the judge's bailiff. So there's a closeness there where they work very, day to day, day in and day out for years. So what are your thoughts about what could have happened or been discussed at lunch that may have been the genesis for this need to have a private meeting? I mean, could it be connected to the lawsuit that you filed?
Here's my speculation, my observation. Timing's important here. After we filed the civil rights lawsuit that made sweeping allegations, once again, the defendants deny those, we really attacked the power structure. We said the sheriff's department knew or should have known of these dastardly sextortion allegations my client were making. At that point, my client was still being prosecuted by Fields and the prosecutor for bail jumping and escape. And I briefly appeared in front of Judge Mullins, and I said, with all due respect, Judge, I think you need to recuse from this court hearing because we have filed a lawsuit in which we've alleged that the dastardly sex acts occurred in your chambers. At that point, it was about a 1-minute hearing. And if you read the transcript, it doesn't sound that bad, but Judge Mullins protested and pointedly assured me he could be fair and impartial and he didn't need to recuse. And of course, I had an ethical obligation to my client. I said, I think you should recuse. And Judge Mullins did recuse. It was about a 1-minute hearing. As a result of that, and this is just me, I felt so uncomfortable that day with what he said. I have declined to ever go back to his court again. I've been offered to represent other people in Judge Mullins' court, and I just said after that experience, I didn't want to do it. Once again, I think if you read the transcript, it wasn't that bad. Judges don't like to be asked to be recused. And the thought hit me, and this is my speculation, that Judge Mullins did not appreciate my lawsuit. And the fact that he wanted to stay on Sabrina's case. Remember, she was charged with bail jumping. She was in jail at the time. She appeared by Zoom, and she was charged with a felony. The bail jumping is nonsense. Of course she was off the ankle bracelet. There was an agreement. That was part of the sextortion. And it was a 1-minute hearing. I mean, that's just my recollection, but I do remember that well.
That is absolutely shocking. I mean, under those circumstances, you almost shouldn't have to ask for a recusal. Like, the judge should be saying, listen, I understand these allegations, they're very close to home. The allegations involve the use of my chambers. Let me ask you, Ned, before we run out of time here, we have about a minute left. The program for that the sextortion was connected to, was this connected to directly to this judge? Were they all these cases cases that were being presided over by this particular judge?
Ankle bracelet programs have expanded exponentially in Kentucky. A lot of my clients are females. They're certainly subject to this sex extortion. And one of the reasons I don't mind getting on national TV is I'm hoping the good that'll come out of this is with this expansion of drug courts and ankle bracelets and lots of women. It's astonishing. Almost half my clients are women charged with drug charges. They are so vulnerable. And I'm hoping at the end of the day, because of this national publicity of this tragedy, people who run these programs will realize how vulnerable these women are to be sexually extorted. Fields pled guilty to 3 women. I don't think in Letcher County, Fields is the only guy who does this stuff.
Yep, I agree.
Easily subject.
Ned, we're out of time, but always appreciate you being with us. Cody Thomas, obviously great work as usual. You know, it's hard to believe a shocking story of women being extorted for sex in a judge's chambers by the judge's bailiffs is not connected to the shooting of that judge by the sheriff in the same chambers. But it just seems there's more to this story. And whatever that more is will likely be the focal point of Sheriff Mickey Stein's defense when he goes to trial. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.